In Argentina, following an intense day of President Alberto Fernandez, important changes in his cabinet and government team have been announced. The elected Vice President of Colombia, Francia Marquez, affirmed at the conference about gender equality and immigration problems at the University of Chile in Santiago that President Gabriel Boric offered to host the peace talks between Colombian state and the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia People's Army. At least 30 terrorist attacks after a string of attacks in the Bouguerie area was neutralized in Nigeria. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. In Argentina, following an intense day for President Alberto Fernandez, important changes in his government team have been announced. Grassroots movements and organizations have already expressed their support to these decisions. The leaders of the Frente Amplio, the Broad Front, and the Argentinian Labor Confederation have deemed recent changes in the president's cabinet as very positive. They say such changes will enable production, industrial development, and most importantly, help halt the rise in inflation. The Confederation of Workers, which would like to see some guarantees for the protection of salaries, pensions, and social plans, has recommended to the new team to redouble efforts to mitigate inequality, but they also urge all political, social, and economic sectors in Argentina to act responsibly. On Thursday, they announced the merger of the Ministries of Economy, Production and Agricultural Development, Livestock and Fishing. In this regard, Security Minister Gabriel Fernandez had the following to say as he departed from the side of government.
If you ask me if I like the changes, I like the color of the new administration. It is what the president wanted and I liked it. Of course I liked it. The Ministry of Economy now will comprise all the elements of production and with the elements of the Secretariat of Agriculture, Livestock and Fishing, as it had always been the case with the Ministry of Economy. That was the Ministry of Economy.
In Brazil, only 10 weeks before the presidential elections, the latest poll places progressive candidate Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva at the top of which with 18 percentage points above Bolsonaro, who is seeking the re-election. According to the latest poll conducted by Datafolha High Institute, the leader of the Workers' Party has 47% of the voting intention, same as last month. Meanwhile, ultra-right leader and re-election candidate Jair Bolsonaro got a slight increase from 28 to 29% if compared to last month, this in spite of the measures that translate into bonuses and rewards for voters to the detriment of the Treasury. According to the study, if this trend continues, the progressive formula of former President Lula has a good chance of getting an absolute majority on October the 2nd, thus avoiding a runoff. As political violence escalates in Brazil, the Supreme Court of Justice has just authorized an investigation against far-right President Jair Bolsonaro for inciting terrorism. In Recife, our correspondent Brian Meir reports.
During the last few months, fascist violence and threats against leftist activists and politicians have escalated in Brazil, leading the federal police to declare front-running presidential candidate Lula da Silva at high risk of suffering an assassination attempt. In response, a Recife city councilor has successfully filed charges against President Bolsonaro for inciting terrorism.
Bolsonaro started making violent statements even before he was elected, when he said, "Let's machine gun down the Workers' Party supporters." After he was elected, he continued encouraging hate speech and violence.
Councilor Cirne filed the charges with the Brazilian Supreme Court, and Minister Rosa Weber approved the case and ordered the federal attorney general to open a criminal investigation. Although there are several investigations already underway against the far-right president and his family, legal experts believe that this case has a decent chance of success.
Inciting terrorism is the act of one or more individuals that, due to xenophobia or racial, ethnic, or religious prejudice, provoke social or generalized terror, causing danger to people, patrimony, or the public peace. President Jair Bolsonaro has done all of this.
Brian Meir, TeleSUR, Recife.
Thank you, Brian, for this report, and now we move on to other topics. Bolivian President Luis Arce met with mayors, assembly members, and professionals on Thursday in the region of Santa Cruz, in the east of the country. At the meeting, they agreed on the need to strengthen industrial and production development, and to that end, they signed some accords to set up and coordinate the actions to boost industrial production. President Arce also granted 560 agricultural insurance policies to producers who were affected by the weather phenomena. Also on the president's agenda was attended to the founding session of the Congress of District Coordinators and Professionals, where he spoke of the importance of academic and scientific work based on social awareness. And the 65th edition of the Caribbean Series will begin on February the 2nd, 2023 in Venezuela, as its games will take place in Caracas and La Guaira, and for the first time will bring together teams from 8 countries. The organization has 8 members: Mexico, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and Venezuela, as well as 4 guests: Colombia, Cuba, Curacao, and Panama. The Caribbean Professional Baseball Commissioner, Juan Francisco Puello Herrera, explained that the tournament will be held in the capital's La Rinconada Stadium, still under construction, and in Mascotún, the coastal state of La Guaira. The General Director of the organizing committee, Humberto Oropesa, said the next year competition will be called Grand Caracas 2023. It will start on February the 2nd and end 7 days later with 2 games, one to define the winner and another to establish the 3rd place.
We had as a stadium or venue the Universitario and Macuto, and we started to work. In fact, we are working on the Universitario. Then the big surprise that La Rinconada will be ready and will be the start of this Caribbean series because of what you already know, the kind of stadium that is being finished. I understand that the stadiums are well advanced. The stadium of La Guaira is a stadium that is very close to completion, I understand, and the stadium of La Rinconada is under an accelerated pace of construction.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. The elected Vice President of Colombia, Francia Marquez, affirmed at a press conference about gender equality and migration problems at the University of Chile in Santiago that President Gabriel Boric offered to host the peace talks between Colombian state and the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia People's Army. The meeting took place in the Red Room of the Palacio de la Moneda, with the presence of several Chilean ministers, as well as the First Lady, Irina Caramonos, and the Foreign Minister, Antonia Urrejola. Marquez also said that the appointed Foreign Minister, Álvaro Leiva, will be one of the leaders of the talks with the Revolutionary Armed Forces, stating Leiva has always been committed to peace for many years. Francia Marquez visited Chile as part of a tour of Latin America, which has already taken her to Brazil, where she met presidential candidate and former President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva, and will also have her in Bolivia and Argentina. At least 5 Haitians drowned and 68 others were rescued after a suspected human smuggling boat dropped at the group off in waters near the inhabited island west of Puerto Rico. In a statement, the Coast Guard said the bodies were found by Puerto Rico Department of Natural and Environmental Resources Park Rangers on Mona Island, adding that 66 survivors, including 2 minors, were safely ashore. United States Coast Guard spokesperson Ricardo Castrodad said no additional people were missing based on interviews with survivors, and that 41 men, 25 women, and 2 children survived, with none having any urgent medical issues. In Panama, workers continue to take to the streets in protest against the high cost of living and in demand of labor reivindications, as well as public policies that benefit the most vulnerable sectors. The mobilized social organizations continue to demand the reduction of fuel and basic food basket prices, social justice, and the effective fight against corruption. The events take place in parallel to the activities of the single table of dialogue, in which the government and the trade union movements continue to seek consensus for the stability of the country and the welfare of the people.
The struggle continues against the high cost of living and the fuel price increase. A progress of the negotiating table between the social movements and the government is already being achieved. But the struggle continues, and here we see the educators in this important struggle.
The government of Nicaragua withdrew the approval granted to Mr. Hugo Rodriguez, the candidate for the post of the U.S. ambassador to Nicaragua. Foreign Minister Denis Moncada indicated that the U.S. representative made interfering statements against Nicaragua during a conference. The official pointed out that diplomacy and in compliance with the postulates of the Vienna Convention, the ambassador or postulant to the post cannot interfere in the internal affairs of the country. Likewise, Moncada rejected all the interfering actions of any country.
The government of Nicaragua, in use of its faculties and in exercise of its national sovereignty, immediately withdraws the approval granted to the postulant Hugo Rodriguez. We reiterate that every diplomat has the duty to contribute to the respect and understanding between peoples and governments. That is to say, in the human community. We recall that as a function of democracy and in compliance with the postulates of the Vienna Convention, the ambassador or postulant to ambassador Hugo Rodriguez cannot get involved in national issues that are inherent to Nicaraguans, and much less disrespect, offend, humiliate, threaten, play a leading role, or be a factor of interference or interventionism in the internal affairs of our country.
And to mark the 107th anniversary of the U.S. occupation of Haiti, social organizations demonstrated to request the United Nations in Haiti to leave the country. The protests were held in front of the headquarters of the United Nations Integrated Office in Haiti, BNUC, located in the municipality of Pétionville, to denounce the implications of the neglect by the international community and the national government of the situation in the Caribbean nation. Citizens demand the BNUC to take up their demands after 107 years of the U.S. occupation, asserting that the mission does not seek the welfare of the Haitians. In Cuba, after the approval of the Family Code, the National Electoral Council announced the beginning of the preparations for the popular referendum on the document. The National Assembly of the People's Power established as date for the referendum Sunday, September 25, 2022, for which the electoral body presented the pre-electoral work schedule. Do you agree with the Family Code? Is the question to be answered by the voters attending the 21,000 polling stations set up for this process. In this regard, the President of the National Electoral Commission of Cuba, Alina Balseiro, explained that the electoral roll registered over 39,000 new young voters, for which reason they are working with the Ministries of Education for their preparation. The Workers' Federation of the Meat and Related Industries in Uruguay declared a conflict in order to reject a series of layoffs and arbitrary sanctions by the national government. The union that brings together all the meat packing plant workers of the country denounced the repression, discrimination, and systematic persecution of the unionized workers, besides the violation of the collective bargaining agreement and irregular payments. They also denounced the wage reduction and the constant violation of the internal agreement by private companies. The mobilized sectors stated that if no solutions are found, they will extend the strike during the next week. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. We have more news. About 3 days after terrorists fatally ambushed the soldiers of an elite unit of the Nigerian army in Abuja, the military reinforced and returned to the area of the attack to conduct a clearance patrol. At the end of the exercise, at least 30 terrorists were killed. The terrorists had fatally ambushed members of the Presidential Guards Brigade earlier this month in the Bugwari area of the Federal Capital Territory. According to the director of the Defense Media Operation, Major General Bernard Ouyenko, the clearance patrol was conducted by troops of the 7th Guards Battalion and the Special Forces in conjunction with the air component of the Operation Will Punch. Ouyenko confirmed that the ground troops also recovered 6 motorcycles, 2 AK-47 rifles, and 1 fully loaded light machine gun magazine during the operation. The 6th Tenure National Assembly of Cambodia passed a draft constitution during its 7th session, with 105 votes in favor out of 106 votes. Earlier this month, the Council of Ministers agreed to pass 8 amendments to the Cambodian Constitution and submit them to the National Assembly. The amendments aim to ensure the normal operation of national institutions after 9 revisions since its promulgation on September 24, 1993. Deputy Prime Minister Bin Shin, who is in charge of the Office of the Council of Ministers, said that this 10th amendment aimed to ensure the supreme institution of the country, especially the executive body, whose main task is to lead the common works of the state, thus ensuring, protecting, and preserving the peace, social security, public order, and political stability of the nation in all circumstances. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa said on Friday that the African National Congress Party was at its weakest after a historic loss in municipal polls last year. The party leader spoke at the 6th ANC Policy Conference in Johannesburg and used the meeting to give South Africans hope. All this happened as the continent's most advanced economy faces a raft of socio-economic crisis. Critics have stated that the government lacks a national plan to tackle poverty, inequality, and the 34.5% unemployment worsened by the coronavirus pandemic, or even provide basic services such as electricity and water. Support from the ANC decreased below 50% for the first time in local polls last November, amid growing disappointment with the party that has ruled the country for nearly 3 decades since the end of apartheid. United States gross domestic product, the GDP, contracted 0.9% in the second quarter of 2022, putting the country into a technical recession after 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. This followed a contraction of 1.6% in the first quarter of this year, putting the U.S. into a technical recession by the global standards. However, the U.S. approaches the recession differently, arguing it is not determined by 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth, as is the case in the United Kingdom as much of the rest of the world. Instead, the National Bureau of Economic Research determines a recession based on a range of factors, such as GDP, real income, and employment. Nevertheless, the White House has pushed back on the idea that the nation is in a recession as the midterm elections approach. TeleSUR English continues to grow. Its signal now reaches Europe. You can order it from your cable dealer or tune it yourself. These parameters that you see on the screen are in place since July 1st. Quite soon, further changes will be implemented for the signals in the Middle East and Africa. Now more than ever, the world connects to us and our stories are heard in other farther away nations. This news multi-platform will continue providing truthful content to oppose the hegemonic media's narrative and our faithfulness to our audience. So we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.